Oi, oi, it's your boy, Tier Formo Lopez, Jack Slack, Fights Gone By podcast, and I'm coming at you on the 22nd of December, just heading into Christmas. It's going to be a shit one over here in the UK. We got some fights to talk about from the weekend, which is always good. And then we don't have any fights, UFC-wise, for, 4 weeks, 3 weeks? We got Rising, which has Kyoji versus Kai Asakura rematch and some other stuff. Tension's fighting someone, I think. You know, it's a year-end show. It's the standard Rising, everything out on the table. Japanese tradition. Have a massive show on New Year's Eve. But in the meantime, let's talk about this UFC card from the weekend. Jeff Neal. I keep saying Jeff Thompson, who was an important self-defense-y person in the UK back in the 90s. Actually, if you've never read The Fence by Jeff Thompson, it's probably the most important sort of like self-defense-y type book you can read in terms of like differentiating self-defense from combative martial arts, combat sports. You know, we all know that learning to box and wrestle is the best. That's the best answer to being worried about self-defense and stuff. But the defense is very much like, how do you keep something from escalating with your body language, but how do you have yourself ready that you can beat the guy to the punch when things kick off, or if things kick off, or if you decide things need to kick off now rather than wait for him to punch you in the face first. So very good book if you've not read it. It's really more of a pamphlet. It's like 30 pages long, but important principle nonetheless, and was pretty influential in like the business of bouncing and being a doorman. But as far as Jeff Neal and Stephen Thompson go, it was, it's another Wonderboy clinic, and that was as much down to Neal as it was down to Wonderboy, to be honest, because we talked about this in the lead up to the fight. If you didn't read the tactical guide, go read it now, because it looks fucking prescient in the aftermath. But Jeff Neal did nothing to cut Wonderboy. I mean, he was trying to use his right hook more to try and stop Wonderboy circling out, but most of his job was like covering up and walking forward. And there's a lot of emphasis put on the size of the cage, because this was the Apex Center, which is the smaller cage, which of course is going to make some difference, particularly if you're someone like Thompson who uses every inch of the cage when he's working. But Neal did corner Wonderboy a lot of times throughout the fight, probably like 12, 15, I don't know, somewhere around that mark throughout the fight. And instead of invest in body work or kicking the legs, he decided to chase the knockout. And the fight metric, or I think the UFC stats now, which makes it even harder to bring up in conversation, because that just sounds like training UFC, bro. But fight metric, it is just a dude on a keyboard typing in numbers when he sees blows landed. But I think they go back and update them in the aftermath. They watch the fight again and then update them. But it's a rough indication of what's going on. And Jeff Neal landed like 80 of 160 punches to the head thrown. As far as they had it, he landed at a higher percentage than Thompson. Thompson was throwing tons and tons of volume, landing 1 in every 3, 2 in every 4, whereas Neal was throwing on the return 1 at a time, and he landed something like 80 strikes at about 47% connection rate, while Thompson had 42. Not huge difference, but it tells you that Jeff Neal was landing, which is the important part. And that's the thing, like, when you say, not great that he came in with absolutely no strategy to kick no tactic or strategy to kick the legs or attack the body at any point, and, I'm trying to be as fair as possible here. They don't give us the full corner audio in between rounds, but you do get, like, the first 30 seconds or the last 30 seconds from each corner, and at no point did I hear the words low kicks or leg kicks or body work at any time mentioned. It was all fake your way in and throw straight punches, you're going to knock him out. It seemed like Neal and his team had been working on the assumption that they were going to just land good on Thompson and knock him clean out, which, again, Anthony Pettis did knock him clean out with a punch, but that was really a miscalculation on Thompson's part. He was really pushing the fight in a way that he doesn't like to, because he was given a guy who basically shouldn't have won against him. But this fight, like, if Neal backed up, Thompson wasn't buying it. Thompson was bringing him forward the entire fight. And, they did say that Neal's coach or head coach was ill, so he couldn't make it for this fight. But he would have told them what to say, like what they've been working on in the throughout the camp to tell him in the corner. This is not just someone forgot to tell Jeff Neal to kick the legs. This is someone, they went through a camp erroneously believing that was not going to be part of the game plan. And the fight metric stats, they counted a load of low kicks that weren't really like proper low kicks, but I think he landed 6 for 7 and 6 for 6 on the body or whatever. But that's not as important as the fact that he was getting in and landing blows, and if you're close enough to land to the head, you're close enough to land to the legs and body. But he was fighting like he was going to touch him one time and knock him out, which is a terrible strategy to have against anyone who is pretty sound in like the principles of ringcraft and denying you engagements. And especially when Thompson's got his hands down and like the whole point is that his head's there as bait. And it got even worse because like the commentary, which was not good for the main event, but they're both like, Daniel Cormier and Michael Bisping are both going, well, he should try and right hook him on the way out, or he should try and head kick him on the way out. And you're like, no, kick his fucking legs. Because Thompson, he's doing the wonderful stuff. I'm laying into Jeff Neal and his team here, but I do want to say that the reason that he had such a hard time was because Thompson is the best ring general in MMA probably at the moment. He always knows where he is in the cage. He does get to the cage, but you saw it like the moment he got to the cage, his stance flattened out. He wasn't in that long bladed stance anymore. He was in a side skip, and then he went right, stopped, changed direction, came back to the left, and Neal would swing like a right hook at him to try and intercept him, but he'd just be right on the end of his reach or leaning back and out the side door before anything else could happen. And once he's past your shoulder, that's the pressure dissipated. He's not feeling it anymore. You've got to hack at his legs and body on the way out, with the hope of slowing him down in the later game. Because if you're not in position to check low kicks, you're going to take low kicks, and that will slow you down over time. But I've seen some truly daft takes on that. Like if you say, he should have been kicking the legs and working the body, or at least kicking the legs, because at least like Vicente Luque had success kicking the legs. And Jorge Masvidal had success kicking the legs, and Anthony Pettis had success kicking the legs. If you say that, and then you get these weird people who are like, well, everyone has a plan till they get hit in the face. And like, that quote doesn't work here. Like, yes, I understand what the quote means, but that was Joe Louis and then Mike Tyson talking about how if once they started blasting people in the face, they just ended up cowering and forgetting what they were supposed to be doing. Jeff Neal was at no point in this fight like concerned Stephen Thompson was going to knock him out. He was just covering up and walking forwards. It was the fact that he never actually went to the legs or body. He never even tried for the most part. He was at no point did he look scared or like he'd forgot what the game plan was supposed to be. And then the weird part was the belching. Tons of belching from Jeff Neal. And they said that he had like congestive heart failure, which is the bad one. So I've no idea what's going on with him and his camp and that. But just, you knew when he took this fight, like Stephen Thompson is an incredibly hard person to deal with. The last lines of my tactical guide for this one were, if Thompson wins this, and impressively, he can start coming back into the title picture from like his exile post Woodley. If Jeff Neal wins this, he gets a rocket strapped to his back and goes to the moon. There is no real incentive. There is an incentive to fight Wonderboy, because if you do beat him, you get a ton of attention. But for most people, fighting Wonderboy is a worse prospect than just ignoring him. And he's too nice. You could probably ignore him and get away with it. But he's another one of those fighters like Jeremy Stevens, if you try, and they're very different fighters, because obviously Thompson is a masterful technician and Jeremy Stevens is more interesting because of his physical attributes. But they're the kind of guy where no matter who you are, you're going to have to change your style to fight them. And if you can't adapt a little bit and change what you're doing, you're going to have a terrible time. I just had a conversation with someone who was telling me like, Jeff Neal's style worked for Jeff Neal. And you're like, no, it didn't. He just walked forward and got hit. That's not working for him. If you're going to be great at this, you need to be able to change up what you're doing. And it's not like low kicking is a secret skill. I remember before Diaz-McGregor 2, there were people on the forums pulling up like footage of an 18-year-old Conor McGregor, bold, skinny kid Conor McGregor, low kicking a heavy bag in like a Thai style from a Thai stance, and it looked crap. And they were like, well, this isn't going to work on Nate Diaz. And you're like, it's a low kick. Like, anyone in the world can be taught to low kick. It's not a secret skill. Now, some people have an amazing low kick, but the point of the low kick is that you're kicking the leg when they're moving, or you're forcing them to pick up the leg and then they can't move. Like, that's the point of the low kick in, the context of fighting someone like Stephen Thompson or Diaz or anyone where you want to falter their movement or take advantage of their longer stance. But anyway, that's enough moaning about that. Stephen Thompson looked great. There were some really cool moments in this one, like because he was presented with sort of like a shelling up target rather than someone who was giving him difficulties kicking his legs and things. He was using more interesting combination work. So he doesn't really like to throw in 3s and 4s because people tend to come back at him, like you found against Luke. Luke would return with a left hook every time after a 3-punch combination, and Thompson would go, "Oh, won't do that again." But there was a really nice one where in the second round, I think it was, he went jab, lead, hook, and the jab, like Neal parried, and then he ducked the left hook, and as Thompson threw the left hook, he slid back on a 45 to his right, and then as Neal stepped in again, he shot another jab up the middle and just speared him right on the nose. It was really nice. Jab, hook, slide back to the right, jab again. And then there was a lot of, if you saw it later on, he was using the dart to get out the side door, but he noticed that Neal was really reaching for his hands, so he'd go, orthodox versus southpaw, he'd go right straight and dart out to his left. And then he started doing that and following with the high kick off his right foot. And he threw that like half a dozen times between round 3 and 5, I think. And there was some other interesting stuff. Like, we talked about how Neal will change stances occasionally just to do it and like to show the opponent something different, but he doesn't actually do anything from his other stance. And every time he switched to orthodox in this fight, Thompson would throw a wheel kick right out of the stance straight at him as soon as he switched. It was really nice. Now, on the other side of that not adapting criticism that I gave to Neal, Wonderboy's sort of the same, because like if you read the tactical guide, I said the side kick and the right straight to the body or the left straight to the body, depending on what stance he's in, would be are going to work, or probably will work amazingly against Geoff Neal, because he likes to advance, likes to get really close when he's going on the lead rather than when he's on the back foot. And he's quite square in his stance, and he just sort of takes them like Kevin Holland just lit him up with bouncing in side kicks, big Bruce Lee style skip up into them side kicks. But I said, Thompson uses the side kick, tends to use it defensively, tends to use it as a jamming weapon. He shoots left and right straights to the body, in order to mix up his combination and change levels. But he's the kind of fighter who tends to, if he spots a big weakness to something that he already does, he's not going to adjust the ratios very much. He's going to stay within his comfort zone, which is throwing 1-2s, going up and down, moving out the side door. He's not just going to pound the side kick in 100 times. He's not that sort of fighter. He won't take advantage of those sort of openings or weaknesses. He will, when he does, it'll look great when he's side kicking Geoff Neal or hitting him in the body, but he's not going to keep going he's not going to adjust the overall performance to take advantage of that. And that's what you saw. So all hail Wonderboy. What a fantastic fighter. Hundreds of best striker in MMA history takes out there now, which I know all the proper kickboxing fans hate, because people will bring up his kickboxing record, which is not like a legit... I mean, legit kickboxing records are a spectrum anyway. There are guys who, go over to Thailand and have 100 fights in the Lumpini Stadium or the car park. And then there are guys who are like Czech Congo, multiple-time world kickboxing champion without having fought anyone you've ever heard of or outside of France. And then there are guys like Wonderboy who kickboxed in a way that isn't even really kickboxing. It's the American kickboxing with no low kicks, which is why he has that movement that opens him up to low kicks. But again, he's been able to work on it because of the lack of low kicks in that style. But yes, he's a wonderful striker. Everyone should be watching Wonderboy just to learn about fucking ring awareness and where you are in the fucking ring, knowing that. I mean, I was watching Canelo this weekend against Callum Smith, which we'll touch on a little bit, but it wasn't a great fight. Callum Smith never really got going or opened up, and Canelo was Canelo. It's very strange because, I watched Canelo, who is dwarfed by Sergey Kovalev, and he walked him down. You know, it was really weird to watch. It's like a Rottweiler being chased by a Chihuahua. It's really strange. And the same was happening here with Callum Smith. You know, he's 5'8" versus 6'3", 6'4", and you know, got to be the best part of 20, 30 pounds weight difference, and he's still backing him up the entire time. It's odd to watch, but you know, that's Canelo. You know, he's I mean, he'll get criticised whoever he fights, but he did fight Gennady Golovkin twice. You know, he'll fight upper weight class. You know, I think that's what a champion should be doing. You know, even if you're not that impressed with the names or who they are, it's still impressive to go up in weight like that when there is such an obvious weight disparity. But anyway, the reason I brought him up was because in one of those rounds, he puts his back on the ropes for a minute just before the bell, and he knows exactly how far it is to the corner. He gets to the wrong corner. He goes to Callum Smith's corner and he goes, whoops. But he knows exactly where he is in the ring at all times. You know, that's a skill that you learn by being in the ring a lot and by doing tons of sparring and just being aware of it. And partly because it's hard to get a full-size octagon. You know, guys don't develop that in MMA, but also just... And a lot of the time, if you see guys training in it day to day, unless it's like the end of their camp and it's just them in there, you'll see like two pairs going in the cage and going, well, you're not really learning from having the cage as much as you should be there. But Stephen Thompson is wonderful for that. It's him, maybe Holly Holm, but you know, Holly Holm has so many other habits that you wouldn't want someone learning. But yeah, Stephen Thompson, fucking wonderful. You know, what else can you say? Anyway, what else was good? I mean, the co-main event between Jose Aldo and Marlon Vera was good. It was another one of those ones that made me like a bit annoyed that you got fighters this good fighting for 3 rounds. You know, it's when they just got to the end of the third round, you're going, well, things are getting, you know, starting to cook here. It'd be nice to see another couple of rounds. But as it was, it ended and you went, oh, that's a shame. Because you got 2 interesting rounds of work on the feet and in the clinch, and then Aldo took the back in round 3 but just sort of held it. And that was it. That was your lot. What was interesting was... we talked about Chito not having the best jab and using front kicks and things like that or front kicks specifically to close the distance, and lots of like low kicks. Aldo, obviously, you know, he has none of the low kicks. He'll just go, nope, checking it, mate, or withdrawing my leg. And he was doing really well at checking kicks and coming in with the left hook to the body. He threw a couple of right low kicks, and then he did the Borkow special, which is where you square your hips and like slide your back foot up like you're going to do a low kick, and then you scoot in with a left hook to the body instead. Borkow used to be amazing at that. He caught Sato with it, and you know, few guys in K1 back in the day. But I used to love that technique. I think it's a good one for anyone to learn, and it also, you know, teaches you how to fucking hip feint, which is a skill that too few fighters actually have down to an art. Or they'll hip feint and then not actually get anything off it for their trouble. But lovely body shots in this one. And then we said in the previous episode, the interesting part of this will be Marlon Vera is at his best when he's striking in the clinch. But to lubricate that striking in the clinch, he uses those short outside trips, which aren't, you know, if he were just going to go forward and try to take the guy down, they probably wouldn't work. But it's the combination of the striking and the trips that works. You know, Song Yadong, he got him down with a little outside trip that really shouldn't have worked on someone like Song Yadong, but he got him because he'd been kneeing him up to that point. He was trying to get his head in front of Song Yadong's. And yeah, he was trying to do the same thing with Aldo here. Obviously, hard against Aldo because you're trying to take down... You'd have better luck trying to double leg a horse for the most part. But I thought he did get off some decent knees, and Aldo was coming back off the fence with his own knees. And yeah, it was nice to just watch them work in the clinch. I thought that was really good. It was a really fun... Vera threw I think it was a front kick, and Aldo parried across his body, ready to come in, and Vera, instead of turning for a spinning back fist, which is quite, you know, blasé at this point, we're quite bored of it, he just threw his front hand out backwards in like a tattoo, a little back fist, and snapped Aldo straight across the jaw as he was coming in, and Aldo was like, oh, ow. It reminded me of that, like, Damien Meyer back fist to Chael on the feet. But who else did that? Oh, Darren Cruikshank, another DC. The white DC, that's what they call him. Darren Cruikshank in Rising, he had a fight where he hit the guy with a D side, a defensive side kick as the guy came in, and the guy like pushed him back on one leg. And then as his leg dropped, he snapped off a backhand with his lead hand. And I think he knocked the guy down, or he hit him with a left hand afterwards that knocked him down. But yeah, that little back fist off the lead hand, I quite like. I think I quite like it off sort of like low hand lead guards anyway, which, you know, a lot of guys end up in that position off kicks to begin with because you drop the lead hand or you throw the lead hand back as you kick. Trying to think of other cool stuff in that fight. I mean, yeah, it was the last 3-4 minutes were just the back control, really. And it wasn't like Aldo was going to finish the choke or anything either. So it was a little bit disappointing in that regard. But, can't complain. He won. He got his win bonus. You only get half the money if you then go, no, I'll stand up. We'll bang it out on the feet. And then you lose a decision because of some wacky scorecards. Talking of wacky, Michelle Pereira came out and was decidedly unwacky against Chaos Williams. Lots of 1-2s, lots of front kicks. Lots of the commentators just losing their shit over everything he did, which was a bit odd. But, I think, I said this guy's a real threat when he fights a little bit smarter. I think, if anything, he fought a little bit too smart in this fight. Get some more insane shit in there and then walk people onto the right straight or the left straight and use the 1-2s and the front kick. Strike the balance. But Chaos Williams, hard guy to do it against because he'd been starching people in his last 2 or 3. Rob Font versus Marlon Moraes. I mean, this made Marlon Moraes like the scariest person in MMA on a 4-fight losing streak. It depends if you count the Aldo one or not. I think he's officially 1-3. Came out, immediately ducked in on a takedown, took Rob Font down. Jumped on a guillotine as Rob Font attempted an underhook get up from half guard, ended up on the bottom, and then they came up to the feet, and Rob Font just snapped him off with the jab. Marlon Moraes has a lot of trouble with the jab, and Corey Sandhagen showed that, and Aldo showed that, because basically he's got the same problem as Aldo. His response to the jab is to slip and come back with 3 or 4 huge swings, and you can either tire him out or you can just pin him with the jab. And to be honest, I didn't like how soon he came back for this one. Whenever we're talking about like chins and chins being cracked and things like that, we are very much in the realms of bro science. But bro science is in things like this where it's hard to test. Bro science is probably all we're going to get. You can't line people up and hit them with a baseball bat and then study the effects on their brain over weeks when you hit them again or whatever. You have to go on what you see happen in hundreds and hundreds of fights. And while a lot of fighters will not have the luxury of being able to do this, I always respected Freddie Roach and Manny Pacquiao too for Freddie Roach saying after that Juan Manuel Marquez knockout, he said, "No, you're not fighting again for another year." And now Pacquiao is 42 and his chin's looking as solid as ever. He could have come back 3 months after that Marquez loss and just got starched by some jobber. He could not have. That's the thing. You don't get to see both outcomes. But I've always thought that was a good idea. Better safe than sorry, especially if you're making millions and millions of dollars. Just take some time off. And Marlon Moraes is not in the position where he is making millions and millions of dollars. But he is a well-regarded guy who's won a lot of bonuses, and I think is on a pretty good contract because he came straight in from World Series of Fighting. I feel like, at any rate, coming back this quick was a big risk. And, how much of that is Rob Font, who, and to be fair to Rob Font, I love Rob Font. I've been singing his praises for ages. I've said he's had the best jab in the division and so on. But how much of that is just Marlon Moraes not being able to take a shot at the moment? Because it was just stiff jabs that put him on wobbly legs. I think, if anything, take some downtime now, because at least you got paid, you got paid your show money, so you don't need the money right now. Just take some time. What else was on here? Anthony Pettis versus Alex Morono. This was interesting because, for some reason, this mat was looby. It was very, very slippy. Someone could make a highlight of just all these fighters slipping over with the Looney Tunes slipping music. Not music, slipping sound effects. Boink. But Pettis came out, slipped on the first seconds of the fight, and Morono was on top of him for the rest of that round. Well, actually, not the rest of that round. Do you know what? It's not an Anthony Pettis, they describe him as like having a taekwondo base, but really his base is EBI overtime rules, because he would be amazing under those circumstances. I've never seen anyone do the turn back into someone, escape from the back, and end up in closed guard on top as often as this guy. Just to remind you, Charles Oliveira got this guy down 5 times and got on his back about 12, and every time Anthony Pettis just turned back into him. And that's Charles Oliveira, What a strange, strange man. But, not a bad showing from him, especially as... Was this his last fight? It's supposed to be, he's supposed to be on the way out the door, but then he said that he might fight someone else in the UFC too. So, I think he's probably just shopping around if it was his last fight. Marcin Tybura and Greg Hardy rubbed each other's tits, and then Greg Hardy gassed out, and Marcin Tybura got a very weak hammer fist stoppage. And then what else was good? Oh, the flying triangle on the prelims. Because there were only 3 finishes on this fight, and one of them was that absolute dog shit Marcin Tybura, Greg Hardy. Greg Hardy got tired on the bottom and just sort of curled up. He treated the ground and pound coming at him from Marcin Tybura like you would your mum trying to get you up for school. He just didn't want to be disturbed, basically. But Jimmy Flick versus Cody Durden. Cody Durden was all over this lad. Jimmy Flick was doing nothing. And then Jimmy Flick throws a kick, Durden catches it, runs through and lands in a flying triangle. Just incredible. What other sport can that happen in? But that was a lot from that card. And what else was good on this weekend? Glory had an event on, and they had Badr Hari versus Benny Abadubada. Can never say his last name, and I'm not going to put it up now. But that was interesting. Badr hurt him. Benny rebounded, and then Badr has looked more and more fragile lately. Benny got the stoppage. And then Cedric Doumbé, who everyone should be watching, very strange character. If you ever watch him give an interview, he's a very strange character. But also in a fight sense, he's a very strange character. He was winning all these decisions and was like, oh, what a smooth, clever, savvy fighter. Beat Nicky Holzken like that. And then he just became this knockout artist. And now he fights like a nutter. He came out and he's just swinging at this guy from the first second of the first round. And then the moment he takes a step back, the guy shoots a jab at him and he leans inside and fires a cross-counter across the top. Really interesting, especially because I've been watching Doumbé's instructional on BJJ Fanatics, which I'll give you more thoughts on when I've finished it. But it was interesting nonetheless, because like the first real technique he shows, it's just like, I love the cross-counter. I got it from Hajime no Ippo. Actually, the other thing about that Doumbé fight that was quite interesting was that his opponent was throwing right low kicks into his lead leg, which was his left leg. And rather than pick up his left leg to check, Doumbé was bringing his rear leg across in front of his lead leg, like kicking the other guy in the shin to check the kick. It was really interesting. Cross-checking on your lead leg. I've not seen too much of that. Certainly in kickboxing and MMA. It's probably more common in Muay Thai, where guys stand a little bit higher. And then the real highlight of the weekend was Dana White's attack ad on every MMA journalist, except me, it seems. I don't know why, but I'm just not big time enough. Actually, maybe I didn't say that they'd fail at this. I just said, I don't know about that. But it was basically people who'd said, I'm not sure about that, about the UFC saying we're going to put on events regardless of COVID. And, completely overlooking the fact that they did an event in Brazil with no testing, and like guys got COVID from it. And so many of the recent cards in Vegas, they've tested the people when they get to the hotel, and then they go, cool, go around Vegas. And then they've had people get COVID or test positive for COVID after they've been in the hotel having tested negative for COVID multiple times. So it's a strange thing to do, but I've got to say, it's been an odd year in that regard. I love having the fights on. I'm glad they're able to do it. I've having seen what the NBA was able to do, it's clear that you can do it very, very safely, or reasonably safely. You're dealing with very fit elite athletes for the most part. Obviously, their cornermen aren't always the fittest, but it's very strange. Like to be a Dana White reply guy and also like COVID doesn't exist. There are still people like that, and it's just like you remember that the sport's biggest star, his dad, who obviously wasn't in the best shape, but died of COVID, and then he retired because his dad died. This year. Does no one else remember that? Is it just me? Very, very odd. But anyway, I reckon that'll do us for this week, because it's fucking Christmas and I've got stuff to sort out before the big day. So I'll be back. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a film room on Kai Asakura and Kyoji Horiguchi, because I found most of their fights are online, which is great. And then next week I'll write something about that. So we'll have a film room coming before then for the Patreon boys. And then we'll do something like a tactical guide that week, and we'll also do a podcast that week. So if you want to get in all of the extra stuff, support the podcast, be a bro. The greatest Christmas gift you can give is my history episodes. And if you want to send an email to the podcast, fightsgonbypodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing at any time, fightprimer.com. I'm your boy, Jack Slack. Sweep the leg, Jeffy.